This is the new Google Pixel 10 Pro Fold, and I've been using it for the last week now, and I have quite a lot that I want to say about this thing. Now, I want to make something clear right off the bat. If you have the Pixel 9 Pro Fold and you're looking to upgrade, I would consider holding out. There's plenty of reasons for that. I mean, this phone has the same camera system, it has pretty much the same display setup, it has an identical fit and finish, and it truly doesn't feel like an upgrade. Now, I don't want this video to be pessimistic. There's a lot of things that I love about this foldable, but there's also a lot of things that are holding it back severely from its competition. Now, today I want to talk about what it's like to live with the Pixel 10 Pro XL and whether it's something that's worth considering. Before we get started though, I just want to say thank you guys so much for the support that you've been showing me. We are literally a couple hundred subscribers away from hitting 70,000, which is insane. So if you're watching, a like and a sub goes a really long way, and thank you so much for being here. Let me start off with the good. You know, the things that Google's done here that actually make the Pixel 10 Pro Fold a better experience to use. Firstly, just like all of the other Pixel 10 devices, this has Pixel Snap, which for the lack of a better word is MagSafe. Now it uses the Qi 2 magnets, and the magnets are internal, so this will work on whatever charging dock or stand you might already own. And Google does have their own Pixel Snap accessories like this Pixel Snap ring, and arguably it makes using the Fold way better to use if you're using this thing caseless, since you can prop it up for when you want to watch some videos or have some extra grip when you're out and about. It's not the strongest magnet by any means, and I do have some concerns with that, especially when you consider like the weight of the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. It actually can pop off quite easily, but this is still something that's nice to have regardless. It can now charge up to 15 watts wirelessly, which isn't the fastest, but it's doubled up from the 7.5 on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. And since we're on that, the wired charging speed has also been increased to 30 watts from 21 watts. So you can actually get 50% in 30 minutes. The battery is also a touch larger. It crossed the 5,000 milliamp hour mark, up from the 4,650 on the 9 Pro Fold, which isn't massive, but it's still a solid bump regardless. And don't worry, I will bring up the battery life towards the end of the video. Now, another addition that Google's brought to the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, which is really nice, is having the IP68 water resistance and dust resistance rating. In short, dust should not be a problem, which is typically a concern on foldables, and it can withstand at least a half hour in 1 meter deep of water. This is actually the first foldable to get this rating, which is actually really cool to see, and it should give you a little more peace of mind with the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. Now, aside from everything that I've just mentioned, along with some little things like the addition of Bluetooth 6, the new Tensor G5, the two new colors, Jade and Moonstone, which is the one that I have, as well as the faster UFS 4.0 storage, nothing has really changed. The phone is the same in terms of dimensions, except for its more narrow hinge that doesn't protrude as much. It's technically a gram heavier. It has the same camera system. It has the exact same display, except now it's boasting an increased 3000 nit peak, and it's even using the same Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which unfortunately means that we don't have any sort of anti-reflective coating. You remember in the beginning when I said that I don't really want this to be a pessimistic video? Here's the thing with that. This is Google's third foldable, and in Canada it costs $2,400 for the base model. This is a very expensive prosumer phone that's made for a very niche group of people, and typically if you're in that demographic that is going to buy a folding phone, you also probably know enough about these devices to know that what you're getting isn't really a value add here. If you're buying the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, you're buying it because of Google's Android skin and some potentially exclusive AI features that may or may not be available, or at least coming to other Android devices soon. And I don't want this video to be a comparison because it isn't, but there's a lot here that I think Google's missed the mark on, unfortunately, that Samsung has absolutely nailed this year with the Z Fold 7. So let me tell you exactly where the Pixel 10 Pro Fold has fallen short. When actually using this phone, there's a lot of things that I think are special to this device only, like the aspect ratio. You still have a 20:9 cover display, which is pretty bang on with a typical 6.4-inch smartphone, so there's absolutely zero compromise here. It's not cramped, typing is really quick, and it feels good too because of Google's pretty much perfect haptics, and the screen, minus the lack of an anti-reflective coating, is actually a very good panel. But it's also not something that is incredibly comfortable to use for any extended period of time when you are using the cover display. It's nearly 11 millimeters thick when folded, it's 258 grams, which by the way is 20% more than the Z Fold 7, and you also have this pretty weird asymmetrical design where on the right side the phone is curved and fits nicely into your hand, and then there's a 90-degree angle on the left to make up for the hinge. This is something that like is kind of annoying with your pinky if you hold your phone like how I do. It could just kind of feel cumbersome after a long period of time. And the bezels are also pretty substantial, especially when you include the actual aluminum frame of the phone. This isn't something that bothers me too much, but at the end of the day, this is a top dollar device. Like, we aren't talking about a budget phone, a mid-range phone, or even a typical $1,000 flagship. Now on the inside, however, there's really not much to complain about. I personally really like the 1:1 aspect ratio. I think when using split view and having two apps running side by side, it does make you feel like you're actually multitasking and not just sacrificing the size of your apps and content. Now I will say I do think it's pretty weird that Google doesn't allow you to split view any more than two applications, so you can't have like a floating app, you can't have an additional app open. It's just split view, which is something that's going to be fine for most people. But again, this is a niche product and a lot of people are going to want to take advantage of this thing as much as they possibly could. I think it's something that I was hoping for Google to bring over this year. I also think that it would be pretty cool for Google to add the option to let us have a different home screen setup for something like the inner screen and the cover display, since I might want different things on the smaller cover screen that I access frequently, like music or my banking. And I would love for something like my inner display to just show me things like my social media applications that I might want to use when the phone is actually open. And also, since we're talking about this, because this is a 1:1 aspect ratio, that does mean that generally you'll have a worse experience with most applications when it comes to social media or even things like YouTube. This is Instagram on the inner display, and it doesn't take advantage of the screen real estate at all. It actually just feels incredibly punched in, it's super claustrophobic, and a lot of content doesn't fit on the main feed. Twitter, for example, zooms everything out and it feels a lot better to use, but it's also just a stretched out version of something that I'd get on a smaller screen like an iPhone. Now, for something like YouTube, 16:9 content is fine. It's enjoyable. I watch videos on here all the time, but it isn't a large display by any means because of that letterboxing. And if you watch someone like Marques Brownlee or literally anyone that films their content in 21:9 where there's the letterboxing on the top and bottom, using the Pixel 10 Pro Fold actually outputs a worse experience than something like the 17 Pro Max, despite it having a bigger screen purely because it's a square. You also can't turn it around to just get like a better fit since it is a square display, so you're stuck with the massive letterboxing, and for some people, that might actually be a really big deal breaker. Also, since we're on it with the screen, the crease is the same as last year. It is pretty bad. Again, this isn't something that typically bothers me because when you're using the phone head on, you won't notice it at all. It just comes down to how this thing looks outdoors, really, with a lot of the light and reflection coming at like different angles. You do notice the crease immediately. This is a trait with folding phones. It's not something I was expecting Google to perfect, but I would have liked to see at least somewhat of an improvement there. All right, let's move on though from like the inner display shenanigans and talk about something that's a little bit more interesting. The cameras. I think what you can do with them is a lot more fun and way more exciting than the actual hardware that's built in. For 99% of people who are gonna buy this phone, this is a pretty decent camera setup, but it is lacking. This isn't the same 48 megapixel sensor that's in the Pixel 10 Pro. This is a 1/2-inch sensor. It doesn't hold up very well in low light, and because it's such a dense sensor at the size that it's at, it can introduce a lot of noise pretty quickly. Thankfully, a lot of processing is done by Google's AI, and it's actually pretty decent. I think Google's color science is nice, and I like the way that it highlights subjects and makes your images pop. It is very easy to take a photo on this phone and post it, and I'm happy with the results out of this camera versus having to spend some time manually editing it. That being said, nothing here, at least when it comes to the specs, is something that I would say is acceptable for this price point. The ultra wide is 10.5 megapixels, so it can look good, but when you zoom in, you can really see the limitations. And the same thing with the 5x telephoto. It's 10.8 megapixels, and it doesn't really give you as much flexibility as you might have hoped for. The selfie camera on the inside and outside is the same at 10 megapixels. Now for video, it can shoot up to 4K 60 or 1080p 240, and it can do that in 10-bit HDR. And now this is what it looks like to use the selfie camera. I'm shooting at 4K 24. This is the exact same setup you just saw me in. You don't have the option to shoot in log, which means that I can't color grade this footage, so I can't match it to the video that I'm already taking. And then also notice this, how when I move the phone, there's a rolling shutter. It's kind of like a jello-y effect. This is not something that I think is necessarily okay for when it comes to a selfie camera, considering if you are going to be using this to film yourself, you're probably going to be moving around quite a bit. And now this is the main camera, which I do think looks the best. The only problem is if I was to use this, I'd have to be pretty far away from where the actual phone is. So my arm is like fully extended and my head barely fits in the frame. You can circumvent this with using the ultra wide, but now you have a camera that looks objectively worse. You can tell how the color in the scene changed completely. And also one thing that I've noticed when looking at these videos on the computer is that the microphone quality when actually recording isn't that great. And again, I don't want to come at this with a pessimistic lens, but to me, it's very troubling that Google, a company that only a couple of years ago was being touted as having some of the best cameras in their phones, is almost like falling short of the mark entirely from what is being offered out there. Like I said though, Google has some cool things. Being able to preview your photos as you're taking them is something that I think some people will enjoy. And I think their magic editor, which can help you easily remove unwanted objects from your photos, is nice to have and does save a lot of time. Personally, I don't really understand features like video boost. I don't know why I would want to send my video on a phone that isn't necessarily capable of taking great video regardless and sending it to a cloud and waiting like up to 48 hours to get it back, because I'm still going to be having the limitations of the hardware no matter what the AI processing can do. At that point, I feel like if you're taking a video of something that is important enough to you that you want to use video boost, you should just be bringing a real camera around. And you guys already know about things like Magic Q and Gemini from past videos. I love Gemini. I think what Google is doing with their assistant is basically unbeatable and they're way ahead of the curve with that. But these AI tools that I'll use on occasion don't really make up for the hardware that is actually in my hands. And that's where I want to talk about the Tensor G5. Actually, performance is pretty good. I haven't had any issues with apps crashing, everything feels really snappy, and when it comes to using this thing like a phone, it's pretty much impossible to tell it apart from even Apple's iPhone 17 Pro Max with the new A19 Pro. In some cases, it's actually better because it feels much more responsive. Now, you do something like load up a modern mobile game, and that changes completely. Destiny Rising is a game that runs at 120 frames per second on the iPhone on max settings, and it looks phenomenal. Now, I open it up on the Pixel, and arguably in the least demanding area, the literal beginning of the game, it's running at what feels like is sub 40 frames per second with insane input delay. And it's also doing that on the lowest possible settings. Okay, now I can chalk this up to the fact that the Tensor G5 is newer, Destiny Rising is a new game. I get it, okay? But even with PUBG Mobile, which came out in 2018, arguably it looks and runs worse. You also have this camera cutout at the top right, which blocks the UI elements. And if you rotate your phone, you get this nice black bar at the top, because why not? Again, I don't want to have to explain myself here. Google actually sent this phone for me to review. If I find problems or have complaints about something that are objectively a real issue with something, it's my obligation to report it, and that's what I think journalism is. Not that I consider myself to be a journalist, but I do have this phone early. I've had the privilege to take a look at it. It is probably something that a lot of people are curious about. If I sit here and just lie to you or didn't do my due diligence, I don't think that would be fair. And as much as I hate the fact that this video has been mostly negative toward the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, I have to tell it how it is. However, on the contrary, I think there's always something for everyone. And as a daily phone for someone that might value the extra screen real estate for their work, or if you're someone that really enjoys what Google is doing with their AI suite, I do think that it could be a very compelling phone, especially because in areas where you're using it as a traditional phone, it does exceptionally well. And the battery life so far has actually been really good. Now, I'll save the specific numbers for when I do my 2-week or 1-month review. I don't think that draining a phone on camera running like a game and like other benchmarks is actually indicative of like the burst workloads that you're going to be doing on your device throughout your day. And it doesn't account for things like standby time and your notifications coming in and 5G connectivity and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of variables that it's important to get right when you actually use a phone versus doing, top-down camera benchmark test. That being said, most of my time with this device has been spent abusing it and trying to learn about it. So I'll tell you that right now, the battery has been perfect. It's been all day. It has not been a problem. However, I'm not comfortable enough to share like the screen on time and tell you as it is in my current use case what I'm getting, because these phones take a long time to actually learn your usage patterns. And it's not fair if I'm like running a bunch of games and taking a bunch of photos, which is not something that I would typically do in my day-to-day life. But it's been a non-issue, and I will say that having that 50% in 30 minutes is nice, and I could top it up very quickly in my car if need be, and I have no real complaints in that area. Phone calls are also crystal clear. My reception has been fantastic, and I actually enjoy the typing experience a lot because of how Gboard is with Google's haptics. But at the moment, that's all I really have to say about the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. I would highly recommend you watch some other people's content and see what they have to say about this device. Never just take one person's word for it. But I will say that in its current state, at its MSRP of 2,400 Canadian dollars, I think that you could do better with your money. Anyways though, let me know in the comments down below how wrong I am. I'd love to hear your opinions. And if you have any real criticisms or any questions, let me know down in the comments below because I'm always open to hearing what you guys have to say. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. A like and a sub to the channel goes a very long way. And if you've watched all the way through, consider dropping a turtle emoji down in the comments below so I know who the real ones are. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.